If there's one thing that I learned early on, it's that if you want to make yourself irreplaceable, be the guy who has all the answers. And so
Right.
if somebody came to me and I didn't have the answer, I was going to be the guy who was going to figure it out. I was going to be the guy who in the future knew how to respond to that. And so if there's one secret to what I consider my success in the industry, that's it.
Welcome to the One Gang Worldwide podcast, your ultimate ride into the world of motorcycles. Visit cyclesworldwide.com where we offer a completely free marketplace for everything motorcycles. Join our One Gang community where you can connect, share info, and swap stories with riders from all over the world. Join for free at cyclesworldwide.com and be a part of the One Gang community right now. One Gang, today we sit down with one of the most respected voices in the power sports industry, Mark Sheffield. From serving in the U.S. Army to transforming one of the largest dealerships in Texas, running 20 groups across power sports, RV, and marine, and now serving on the board of the National Power Sports Dealer Association, Mark has lived and breathed this industry for decades. Mark, thanks for joining us and welcome to the show.
What's up, Mark? What's going on, buddy? Great to have you on the show. Been looking forward to this one for sure. He's a wealth of knowledge, but we're going to kind of kick it off a little bit to loosen the mood up and do the break the ice section. We're going to go 10 questions. No
Okay.
right or wrong answer. Just have fun answering them. All right. Let me know when you're ready.
Good.
All right. Let's do it. You've worked with just about every OEM under the sun. If you had to choose one brand's logo as a tattoo, which would it be?
Ooh, one I don't carry, Ducati.
Ducati. All right. Nice one. Be honest, who's harder to manage, a service tech on a Monday morning or an Army tank crew at 5 a.m.?
Army tech, and not just on Monday, any day of the week.
All right. You've worked with just about every machine out there. If tomorrow you could only ride one last bike, what's your pick and why?
I would have to go with a Rokon 2-wheel drive. So a little bit of off-road fun.
Nice. Good choice. If you could have dinner with one person, dead or alive, who are you breaking bread with?
Wayne Rainey.
Hey, okay, nice. You've written about credit card fees and margins, but if you walked into a dealership as a customer, what's the one thing you try to haggle anyway?
You know, I'm not a haggler, so I value the experience more than anything else. I'm more than willing to pay all the money if the experience adds to the value.
Okay, good answer. Who tells the taller tales? Sales guys on the showroom floor or old soldiers swapping stories?
Sales guys, easy.
Sales guys. Okay, cool. Every dealer's got a wild customer story. What's the one that still makes you laugh whenever you tell it?
Oh, I was in the back one day and I got a call from our GM, or actually he was our sales manager, and he said, "Hey, we got a problem customer up here and need your help." And so I go walking up there, and I'm walking up to the front door, and I see this guy standing out in the parking lot with a military Kevlar on, a bandana around his face. And I was like, "Hold on a second." I walked back to my office. I had a couple of weapons in my office, and I picked up a 9mm, loaded it, and stuffed it in my back pocket. And as I'm walking out the front door, I hear the receptionist go, "Oh crap, he's got a pistol." And I was able to go out there and get in this guy's face and de-escalate the situation, but it was
Wow.
it was looking pretty crazy, and the guys thought I was nuts for just going out there and not calling the cops.
Well, good for you for handling it. Wow, that's crazy. All right.
John Wayne.
Yeah, that's number 8. If you could drop the clutch and ride anywhere tomorrow, where are you riding?
I've traveled a lot around Europe, and I like to kind of stay in areas where, English is the spoken language. It's just easier. Although having just got back from China, Google Translate makes it super easy to communicate with almost anybody. But, I think, the roads and everything are great. I would love to do a ride around Europe.
Around Europe. Nice. I just came back from.
You always wonder if when you have a translator, how accurately they're translating what you're saying, though. There's always that little slice of doubt when you're having those conversations.
Oh, I agree. So you never know exactly what's being said behind the scenes.
Yeah, no question. All right, let's do it. Power sports, RV, marine. If you had to spend a year working in only one, which industry would keep you smiling the most?
I'm only passionate about power sports. I mean, it was interesting. I worked with a lot of marine and RV dealers. RV was actually really easy to transition to. There's a lot of similarities between RV and power sports. Marine was really tough. I mean, marine people, you have to understand that they're just kind of a different breed. I mean, they don't say left and right. They say port and starboard, and they call people captain and landlubber. And you got to know the difference between flotsam and jetsam. It's a different industry, and I won't say I struggled with it, but I'm still passionate about power sports.
Yep, gotcha. All right, last one. You're making it through, man. What's the one thing outsiders will never understand about running a dealership until they lived it?
I think most would acknowledge this is that they just don't understand how chaotic the day to day is. This is actually a problem with a lot of the vendors who support the industry. And I say vendors, some are OEMs, some aftermarket. They don't get all the craziness that goes on. The employees, you get to work at 8:30 in the morning and employees are already calling in sick, and somebody bought a bike the day before and it's broken down, and they want to get it picked up, and you got two manufacturers that show up during the day that didn't have appointments and they want to sit down and take orders, and the day to day is just incredibly chaotic. And I've had a couple of friends who kind of supported the industry for a long time and then bought dealerships, and I've actually asked them that exact same question, and it's always the same thing. It's like anybody from the outside just doesn't understand the chaos that exists within the walls.
Right. Yeah. Good answer, man. All right, buddy, you made it through. Now we're on to your journey. So looking forward to hearing this part.
Yeah. Mark, take us back to Letchworth Garden City in England. What was young Mark like?
I was pretty rough. I'm, just hit 55 last week, and I'm still trying to make up for all the hell that I put my mother through. But my mother had me when she was 16. I was born just north of London, England, and my father died when I was a year and a half old. And that's all right. It happens. You can't live in the past. So everything happens for a reason. But my mother and her sister tried to hold it together, but they really struggled. And my grandfather worked for British Aerospace. He did a lot of really cool stuff. Worked on the Concorde and deployed missile systems. And in the end of his career, kind of did what I did for the last 9 years with 20 groups, kind of help businesses to improve. And there was a point where he reached out to my mother, I think in probably 73, and said, hey, pack your bags, you're going with us to Saudi Arabia. So, I got to travel around the world, and, we lived in Spain, Zambia, Abu Dhabi, Germany, or Germany was kind of later on, but got to live in some different places around the world. And at some point we were living in Saudi Arabia, and our next door neighbors were from the States, and they invited us to come back to the States. And so we did, and she met a guy, and they decided to get married. And so we moved from Saudi to Texas, and then I kind of went through the school system there, and graduated from school and joined the military a week later.
Wow. All right.
Cool. Mark, you mentioned your grandfather being in aerospace, and before we started recording this episode, you had mentioned that you're a nerd, just like I am. Nerds Unite. Did that kind of nerd personality, was that born into you, or do you think that you absorbed some of that from your grandpa in aerospace?
I've always wanted to know how things work. I'm probably a lot better at taking things apart than I am putting them back together again. I'm worried about rebuilding that Kawasaki that's up in the garage, because I'm going to have a box of leftover parts, and I'm going to be like, yeah, I think these probably needed to go in there somewhere. I probably missed a step, but I'm a proud nerd. I will tell anybody, I'm a nerd, and I think anybody who thinks that that's an insult is just living in the past. I mean,
Yeah.
ignorant.
I'll spend hours working on an Excel formula just to try to get it right. Although, you know, to be honest, ChatGPT is really kind of weakening my Excel
Game
skills.
changer.
Yeah, you can just tell it what you want and it does it. And so,
Yes.
but
Amazing tool, man.
I love to take things apart. I love to understand how things work. And I think I've applied that not just to physical objects, but everything in my life. You know, working in a dealership, I want to know how things work. I want to identify the best way to do something. I want to put that into a written process, and I want to do it every time going forward.
You mentioned,
Crave efficiency.
efficiency. Hey, you mentioned when you guys moved to Texas, you finished up high school, and then you went straight into the Army. What made you go into the tanking side? I think you were M1 Abrams tank system specialist. Was your how did you go that way when you had other alternatives?
You know, I was, I always said that, you know, my mother, for all the good that she always married for love, not money. And so, you know, growing up in Texas, we lived on the other side of the railroad tracks. There were a lot of times where if, you know, it wasn't for food stamps or WIC or welfare, that we wouldn't have had food on the table. And I think my parents struggled to pay the rent and the electric bill most every month. So I I think I always knew from when I was a kid that I wasn't the kind of person who wanted to go to college. I did very well in high school. The high school I graduated from, I think I was sixth in the class, and yet,
Wow.
you know,
Great.
I never really kind of saw that secondary education as something that appealed to me. And I think I was a junior, and the recruiters from the military came around one day and kind of talked to all the classes, and the what the Army had to offer just kind of appealed for me. I think it's interesting as a kid, you don't really think about the Army, you know, hey, you might go to war, you might put your life on the line one day, but and you know, we hadn't really fought in a war since Vietnam, and so I really wasn't kind of front of mind. But you know, I ended up having a good relationship with the recruiter, and you know, off I went to basic training 6 days after I graduated.
How do you think the military discipline, obviously the Desert Storm experience, shape you for the business world later?
Oh, it's. I think that there's a small number of people who kind of look back on their military career in a negative way, but I think the majority of us, I got way more out of my 4 years in the Army than I ever put in. I was a young punk kid when I joined. I had a active arrest warrant out for me, you know, and the discipline that you learn in the military, I mean, it's a wake up call. It's like nothing that you can prepare for. You go to what they call MEPS, which is kind of your in processing, and you're there for 3 days, and they cut your hair off, and they give you a uniform, and you get 200-300 different vaccines to travel all over the world. It's pretty crazy how they do vaccines in the military. They have these air guns, and they just literally you just get.
Bend over.
Yeah, it's an air gun, and it injects through air pressure the vaccines into your arm, and if you move, it just slices you wide open. The guy in front of me got his arm cut and had to get some stitches. But you know, it's an eye opener. But you go through maps, and then a few days in, you know, you kind of understand how to march, the basics and all that, and they put you on this trailer called a cattle car, and they drive you 4 or 5 miles, and they open the doors, and there's 8 drill sergeants standing there, and then they pretty much just yell at you for the next 8 weeks. The respect I have for the drill sergeants, it's utterly, what they do has probably changed more lives than any college in this nation or anything else that goes on. It's a life-changing experience if you're really open to it. And I don't have any regrets about my life. Having the chance to do it again and again, I'd do it over and over.
Awesome.
Killer. My brother told me a story after his experience where one of the vaccines, they had to drop their drawers and put their hands on a table, and it was like cycling through cattle, and they gave that air gun shot right in the butt cheek. Just all the guys were sore for a full day or two.
Yeah.
But anyway, segueing into
the power sports world. After the Army, how did you make that jump into motorcycles and power sports dealerships? How did that evolve?
I always wanted I always wanted a motorcycle. Again, I had one when I joined the military, and unfortunately it went missing after I joined. I don't even to this day know what happened to that motorcycle. And I was stationed in Germany for a couple of years, 2.5 years, and I spent 9 months in Iraq while I was over there. Saved up a bunch of money, and so couldn't get a bike in Germany, and came back to the States, and my roommate had a car. And so the second day I was back in the States, I wanted to do two things. One was go to Schlotzsky's and get a sandwich. I hadn't had one in a few years, and I kind of craved one. And then I wanted to go to the motorcycle dealership. And there at Fort Hood, all the dealers were lined up in a row. And so he just dropped me off, and I walked down the strip until I found one, and bought a Yamaha FZR 600, paid cash for it. And I just ended up spending so much time at the dealership that the owner of that store, who I think you might have met the other day, he offered me a job. So I got out of the military on a Monday and started working in the power sports industry on a Tuesday.
Wow, that's crazy. That's cool. That's cool.
Now, that was 33 years ago.
33 years ago.
Huh.
Nice. So you worked at some, you worked at what, Yamaha of Killeen, Texas Motorsports, Woods Fun Center. Worked across multiple big dealerships, correct?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say Yamaha Killeen was big when I started there. I think I was employee number 4 or 5. So, there really wasn't nothing you did. I would be on the sales floor sometimes during the day. I'd be in service at night trying to put bikes together, and you kind of figured everything out. And I was there for about 2.5 years and just decided that I wanted more. And so, kind of a long story. I won't bore you with the details, but, I got a hint that Woods Fun Center down in Austin needed some help. And I called down there, talked to a guy named Scott Craig, and he said, give me 30 minutes and I'll fax you an offer. And he faxed me an offer, and 2 weeks later, I went to work down in Austin, and that was an interesting experience, going from a dealership of 5 employees to one that had probably 40 at that point in time, and selling a couple of hundred bikes a year to selling a couple of thousand units a year was a big shock. And then in 99, I think it was 99, Woods was acquired by a consolidator called APS, and again, not boring you with all the details. A couple of years after that, APS offered me a job, and so I went to work at corporate headquarters and did dealer acquisitions for a couple of years. And so I learned a lot more about what goes on behind the scenes and the financial pieces. But in the end, after about 2.5 years, I realized that I'm not a very corporate kind of guy. I don't like that lifestyle. I'm wearing a sport jacket, or I think that's what they're called. I don't own one, or that stuff's dumb.
You mentioned that at the conference too, man. You don't own a suit or a jacket.
It's stupid. The clothes don't make the man makes the man. So right. I just didn't really enjoy that. It wasn't fun, and I felt like I was kind of living in Groundhog Day. And so after a couple of years, I left there and started a new adventure.
What did those early years in the dealerships between the 3 teach you, kind of like the good, the bad, and the ugly?
Starting at Yamaha Killeen, we didn't even have a computer system when I started there. So you were looking up, using microfiche and looking up parts in the books. And we had this crazy typewriter thing we had to place orders on. And it sucked because there was no backspace key. So Yamaha has these 12-digit part numbers. And if you made one mistake, you were just screwed. No. You had to start over again. So it was really painful. And I won't say that, I wasn't on the forefront of computer technology, but I was at Woods in Austin for about 2 or 3 months, and the server that they had running the store crashed. And there were 40 employees standing around looking at each other like, what the hell do we do? And I was just the one who said, you know what, I don't really know what the hell's going on, but I'm going to figure this out. And so, I kind of got on the phone and, worked on it for a couple of days and got the server back up and running. And at that point in time, that kind of became my baby. And a couple of years later, we had a few computers in the store that had dial-up internet on them. And, I went to Mark Woods and said, hey, I need $6,000. I want to figure this computer thing out. And so he gave me $6,000 and I went to Dell and I bought a server and I bought some cables and I bought a Networking for Dummies book. And I literally learned how to put cables together and build a network from the ground up. Had a DSL line put in, strung cable all around the store.
Nice.
And, the next thing we had kind of our own little internet going on and what was high speed internet back then, which would, probably make somebody go crazy if they had to use that today. And, so that was kind of my foray into the technology side of the industry and, learning how to do that. I think, if there's one thing that I learned early on, it's that if you want to make yourself irreplaceable, be the guy who has all the answers. And so
right.
if somebody came to me and I didn't have the answer, I was going to be the guy who was going to figure it out. I was going to be the guy who in the future knew how to respond to that. And so if there's one secret to what I consider my success in the industry, that's it. People come to me for answers and that's what I do still to this day.
Yeah.
Was it before or after the corporate experience that you felt like was Groundhog Day, or was it the server crash solution? What moment was it that you realized that this industry isn't just a job, it's my life path?
I had said that, I don't even know where I came up with this, but I had always said that whatever I was doing when I was 35, that was going to be what I did until the end. And I was in power sports at 35. And so that's just kind of how it played out. I think when I hit 35, I was managing a big Honda store down in Houston. I did that for about a year and a half. And I was a year into that, and Mark Woods called and said, hey, I want to buy this store in New Braunfels. Do you want to come manage it? And, I'll make you a partner in the store and you can get some sweat equity. And so, that was when I went from kind of being an employee to an owner. I mean, all that kind of happened right around the time that I was 35. And so, I'm not going to say that there was really a light bulb moment, but I did have some opportunities to go work in other industries. I could have gone and worked in automotive, and I had the opportunity to buy into a Harley store. And, in the end, there's probably some things that I could have done where I could have made a lot more money, but I don't think there's anything else that I could have done that would have allowed me to live the life that I've lived, and,
Awesome.
and I don't have kids. It's me and my wife, and we got 3 cats, and one of them you probably heard her in the background. She'll probably
Yeah,
make
we
it.
just saw her pass by. Yeah.
Yeah, she's been in every Zoom meeting I've been on for the last 6
Nice.
years since the pandemic started. But, I've had the opportunity to lead a great life, travel around a lot of the world. And, I've got more cool toys than I know what to do with. I need to quit buying stuff at this point in time because I got too much. But, I got the opportunity to, help, I've been helping my nieces go through college at this point in time. And
Nice.
what more can
Hey,
you want?
That's right. Okay, I wanted to ask you a question. When you got that call for Wood Cycle County, which is really one of the biggest and largest dealerships in Texas, what were some of the key moves or philosophies that when you got there, that you decided to implement your way to help it scale the business up?
When that store, the first year that we got there, they had sold 350 bikes. It was a motorcycle store when we bought it. Over time, it kind of turned into ATV, UTV, off-road store. We're trying to get back to being a bike store right now. But, you know, the reason that we had the opportunity to buy the store is the guys that owned it before us had gone through a tax audit, and the state had said, hey, you owe us $350,000, something like that. And
Wow.
it was more money than they had at that point in time. And so they needed to sell the store or it was going to go away. And, you know, I remember early days, sitting down with Mark Woods, and, you know, he told me one day, he goes, you know, he's more visionary than I am. I'm just a worker. I'm just, you know, I like being in the trenches. And he said, you know, one day the store's going to make $1 million. And I was like, great. You know, he's in his 60s and he's already going senile. There's no way that's ever going to happen. And we hit that point in 2010 or 2011, somewhere right in there. And,
Nice.
you know, we've never looked back, but it was, I think what I brought to the table, and I think kind of what really helped us in our path to success, was just being a process guy. I looked at everything we did and figured out how can we formalize this? How can we repeat it? How can, when we have new people come in, just say, here's how we're going to do business. And if you do this, you'll be successful and we'll be successful. And I think the other thing that we did that is probably counterintuitive to a lot of people in the industry is that we looked at, you know, the traffic flow into the store. And if you staff for the slowest time, you're going to have too many people. Or if you staff for the busiest time, you're going to have too many people when it's slow. If you staff for the slowest time, you're not going to have enough people when it gets busy. And so trying to find that middle ground and just being happy with the fact that, you know, there's going to be some times where a customer comes in and we don't have enough people to take care of them. And so by doing that, we were able to take our bucket of payroll and divide it up by a smaller number of people. We've hired a lot of the good staff from our competitors over the years who said, you know what, I came here and I'm making 15, 20% more than I was in a higher position at the competition. So, you know,
Awesome.
just that process and the people, and, you know, it takes 3 or 4 years to assemble a good team. And I think we were always focused on that. And, you know, even in the recession in 2009, you know, Mark Woods had always said, you know, if somebody good and talented comes through the door, even if we don't have a space for them, let's figure it out. And, you know, I had this guy came knocking in 2009 named Joe Silvernell, who, you know, I've become, you know, probably, he's a good friend at this point in time. He doesn't work for us anymore. He just left to go do something else. But, you know, Joe came knocking and we didn't have a spot for him, but he had all the right skills. And so, you know, we figured it out and we hired him even though we didn't have the money. And, you know, things just kind of worked out. And, you know, 5 or 6 years when I left and kind of moved to part-time, he took over the GM role and he was able to take the store to the next level.
Nice. Was Mr. Woods your mentor in the industry? Like, when do you feel like he was one of the guys that really made you better, and or did you have somebody prior to him?
No, I've never worked with anybody who I didn't extract knowledge out of. It's everything's a learning experience. Even if you're watching somebody do something wrong, you're still learning how to be better going forward. But
Right.
Mark Woods is, I wouldn't be here talking to you today if it weren't for him and his wife. Not only Mark Woods, but his wife. I knew his father before he passed away. His father was an incredible individual. And, you know, Mark has given me more opportunity and more chances. I mean, even a few days ago, my wife works in downtown DC, and I hate going to these stupid corporate events and things like that. And every now and then I get drug into one of those, and my wife now introduces me and she goes, "Hey, this is my husband, Mark. Just so you know, he doesn't have a filter." I guess, I don't know what part of my brain it is, but I don't have that. I don't have that thing in my head that says, you probably shouldn't say this because there's going to be some fallout. And you saw me talking on stage the other day.
Yeah.
I say some things that you probably never seen anybody say in a presentation before. That's just who I am. And even a few days ago, I sent an email to a couple of people, and it didn't resonate wrongly with me. It resonated very badly with the people that I sent it to. And, Mark Woods was not happy that I sent it, but, he called me up a day later and he goes, you know what? I don't really agree with what you did, and I'm not going to stand behind it. And, we talked about it for a couple of minutes, and then we moved on. And, I'd love to say that I learned a lesson, but I'll probably make the same mistake a few months from now. And, it's interesting. I think if the roles were reversed, if I was Mark and he was Mark, and we're both Mark, so, it makes it easy to mess it up.
Right.
But, if the roles were reversed, I'm not sure that I would have put up with me for the last 30 years at this point in time. But he has, and, him and his family have made me family. I mean, they call me family. Somewhere around here, I've got a birth certificate or an adoption certificate that they gave me years ago that said that I'm family. And it's, wow. I just don't see a lot of people in other industries who have these kind of experiences, yet I don't think I'm the anomaly in this industry, because I know a lot of other people who manage stores and work in the industry who have had somewhat similar experiences. And you know what? I've told Mark that if anything ever happens to him, that, my allegiance is not just to him, it's to the family. And I'll be around as long as they want to put up with me.
What's up, One Gang? I used to think that if I spent big money on riding gear with a logo on the back, I was getting top quality. I gave Leather Up a shot. I wasn't sure at first, could I really get quality gear without spending a fortune? But after putting tens of thousands of miles on their jackets and vests, I had my answer. No busted zippers, no loose stitching, just solid, well-made gear that lasts. Leather Up carries trusted brands like Milwaukee Leather, Hot Leathers, and more, with gear for every rider and every budget. Plus, their customer service actually cares and picks up the phone, something rare these days. So do yourself a favor, check out leatherup.com. Whether you need jackets, vests, chaps, boots, helmets, or luggage, they've got you covered. And because you're part of the One Gang Worldwide family, use code CW20 at checkout for 20% off your entire order. Stop overpaying, gear up with Leather Up, and see the difference yourself.
Gotcha. So moving back, but chronologically forward, at one point you decided to make the leap into running your own business. What drove that decision, and what were those early days like for you?
Never had never been in my head to do that. If Mark hadn't called me and I think that was probably it was early 2006, because I got married that year. Mark called me in early 2006, and he was never a technology guy. It was really funny. He called me and he said, "Hey, I'm at this dealership and I can't tell you their name." And so I looked down at the caller ID and it told me the name of the store that he was at. And he goes, I'm in their computer system and I'm trying to get some data out of it. Can you help me? And so, I told him what to do and kind of got in there and figured it out real quick. And, so it was a week later that we were talking about buying that store. And it was probably that same weekend that Mark said, "Hey, maybe a week or two later, he called me up and said, 'Hey, do you want to come and manage this thing?' And honestly, I wasn't sure that I wanted to do it. I started out in the industry as a parts manager, and I really kind of liked that detail piece. I mean, to this day, you want to know what the lever is for a YZ 250 or 450, 23X, 83912, 0000, or you need a Virago 750. It's the oil filter. It's 4X7 13440 0900. I got all that stuff in my head, and that's 30 years old knowledge at this point in time.
So you're like Rain Man from the parts department.
I can't remember people's names to save my life. I can't remember your name, and I've met you a few times, and the guy down below, Ben or Bob or something like that. So that's not my thing, but numbers, all in every day of the week. There's only one number that I can't remember, and that's my wife's birthday. I know what day Hitler was born, and I can't remember my wife's birthday, and she gives me crap about that every year when I miss it.
Let me ask you a question about the ownership part, because owning a business always comes with sacrifices. Every dealer always talks about growth, profitability, but what about kind of the personal cost? Was there things in your life when you took this dealership and bought this dealership, family time, balance, things of that nature, that things that really don't get mentioned when you're running or owning your small business? Take us a little bit into that part of your life and, some of the sacrifices you had to go through.
I think my situation is different because I knew since I was a kid that I never wanted kids. And having dated a lot of women over the years and, kind of later on, that always kind of came up early on. I'm like, just so you know, I'm not religious and I don't want kids. And I had, a few other things that were important to me. And so I kind of early on, in my 20s and 30s, I would tell people that. And
right.
So, I think that maybe there's some people out there that kind of perceive that as a negative, but to me, it's been incredibly liberating. It's given me the ability to be able to hop on a flight and go across the country or across the world on short notice and do what I want to do. It's given me the ability to have, I got a collection of 65 guns and some motorcycles and all other kinds of stuff around the house. But it also kind of gave me the ability to really focus on work. And when I met my wife, we've been married for about 20 years at this point in time, and I think she knew early days. I don't want to say that the work comes first, but I think for me it almost always has. And my work and my personal life, there really is no boundary between those two. I think I just enjoy what I do when I hear people online talking about, oh, I got to have work-life balance. I'm like, you're probably in the wrong job. There's a lot of, things that are being said. If you like what you do, it's never going to work. Blah, 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 blah. But I think the reality is that for me, I don't know that there's ever been any sacrifice. There probably have been a couple of times in my life where the sacrifice has been my mental health and just maybe pushing too hard, or I think my personal struggle in the business has always been not being able to go home and just turn it off and forget about it for a little bit. But, I go home and I got something hamster running on the treadmill and it won't stop and I can't sleep. I still get to this day, the employees at the dealership and my friends are like, what the hell were you doing sending me an email at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning? And, there's just times where I stay up late or I get up, in the middle of the night and I'm like, I can't sleep. And so I'll go work for a couple hours. And if I get that out of my head, then I'm good. I can go back to sleep. But if I don't get it into...
Right. You're tossing and turning all night.
Yeah. So I think that, for people that have kids, it's probably not going to say that, it's probably the majority of owners and GMs have kids and they've been successful at this as well. But, for me, there is no boundary between the business and my personal life. They are very integrated with each other. And I really even struggle to comprehend what retirement would really look like. Right. I don't know how I would separate the two.
Yeah. So here's a question specifically for just related to dealers, dealership owners and dealers in general. common denominator between them all, from what we've heard talking to so many people about it, is staffing, culture, and workflow. Those seem to be the largest struggles that dealers tend to have. What's one lesson that you've learned the hard way that could save another dealer years of headaches?
Um, you know, I worked for a consulting company called Spader Business Management for 9 years that was bought out by another company a few years ago, and I don't work for them anymore. And they've got a lot of intellectual property. I think I have to be a little bit careful about what I say, but Mark Woods was definitely the main mentor in my life. John Spader, I probably would have to put in second place. I learned an incredible amount from him. And I think one of the key lessons along the lines of that question that you asked is that when you're building a business, I think people have to understand that to do it in the shortest possible time, which in reality is probably 4 years. I don't think there's many ways to shortcut that, is that you first got to define your culture. And so, what's important to us? What do we want to represent as a business? Once you do that, then you start hiring people who are aligned with your culture. And if you try to reverse that and you try to say, okay, we've got these people, we're going to design culture around them, it doesn't work. So you got to do it in that order. And then once you figure out who those people are, then you can start putting process together. And you can't do it any other way. You can't be a strong process guy like I am and say, okay, we're going to create the process and then everybody's going to follow it. Because if you got people that aren't aligned with the culture, or they're just, not capable of doing the work that you're asking them to do, they're never going to be able to follow the process. And so it's the one lesson that I've learned. There's no other way to do it than to follow that methodology, and you got to be committed to it. The other thing I would say that is I think incredibly important, and there's always the exception to every rule, and I understand that, but we don't make policy based on the exception. And the other one that I would say that's very important about the power sports industry is that absentee ownership doesn't work. This is a low margin industry. There's not a lot of money that we take to the bottom line. I know that it seems like every customer who comes through the door thinks that if we're selling a UTV for 20 grand, that we paid 10 grand for it and we're making all the money in the world.
Got it for 10.
Yeah. When the reality is dealer cost on that machine was probably 18.2 or 18.5. It's a small margin. And so the delta between being profitable and having a hobby that costs you a lot of money. And, that's kind of the joke I've always said for years in a 20 group is, what do you call a business that doesn't make money? A hobby. It's a very small delta between those two. And absentee ownership in this industry never ends well. It always leads to bad culture, not the right employees, and ultimately the business being a hobby and you having to put money into it. So it's just, what have I learned? That's what I learned.
All right. You mentioned a 20 group. You spent nearly a decade running the 20 group in the power sports. For listeners who don't know what exactly 20 group is, can you explain to them, and why do they matter so much for the industry?
Yeah. So, a 20 group, they exist in a lot of other industries. I think the funny thing about 20 groups is that there's actually a company who runs 20 groups for 20 group providers. But for those who don't know what they are, essentially it's 15 to 20 dealers who get together 2-3 times a year. We report our financials into a common system so that we can compare them. And you really just sit down a few times a year and you look at, what are you doing right? What are you doing wrong? What are the opportunities are? And there's very, very few cases where somebody sitting in that room can express a problem or an issue that they're dealing with and not have somebody else in that group who goes, yeah, I dealt with that. Here's how I dealt with it. And here's how I fixed it. And there's somebody else in the room who goes, yeah, I had the same problem. And here's what I tried and it blew up on me and it cost me a bunch of money. Don't do that. That's what a 20 group is. And
That's awesome.
the unique thing about the industry is that there's not, it's still kind of in its infancy in some areas. There's not a lot of standards. And, one of the problems is that you can have two dealers who both sell the same brand in the same state, and you look at their financial statements and they're using completely different systems. And so it can be really hard to compare. And so that's kind of one of the neat things about a 20 group is that they normalize how dealers report things so that when you're talking about margin on the unit that you're selling, you're talking about exactly the same thing. And, there's a lot of metrics in a dealership that I can take two dealers and ask them the same question, and they can be doing everything almost exactly the same in their store, but financially they treat it a little bit differently. And the metrics that they give you can be 5-10 points different between the two. And yet they're not doing anything differently. And so that's the power of the 20 group, is normalizing all that so that you can have a discussion based on what's really going on. And I would say, one of the interesting things that I learned over the years is that, especially the company that I work for, their reporting requirements are extremely complex and a lot of work and a hurdle that a lot of dealers can't overcome. But, we had dealers that joined our 20 group and they would come and, it would take them 9 months, a year to start getting us good numbers to where we could understand what's going on. And you would, for that period of time, you would have conversations with these dealers and they would be telling you, well, here's what's going on and here's what I'm doing and here's why I'm badass and you need to make space for me into this group and listen to me. And then you get their numbers and you're like, everything you said was BS. So everything you said was wrong.
Ego driven.
Yeah. And, people tell lies and maybe it's not intentional, but they just don't know. And in the end, the numbers don't lie. And so I'm a nerd. And if it kind of, I think over the years scared people, because I could have somebody report into our system and I could look at their numbers and then I would sit down and tell that person a story about what was going on in their dealership, what they were dealing with. And they'd be like, have you ever been in my store? And I'm like, nope, that's what the numbers told me. They don't lie.
Gotcha.
That's cool. That's like you go fishing and you caught the fish. It was this big. It was actually this big. So recently you announced, Mark, that you're leaving the 20 group game. What led to that decision? And are you replacing that time commitment with something else? Do you have, a next chapter?
So yeah, I want to be careful. I don't have an attorney knocking at my door. Let's just say that there was an amicable separation and, I've moved on to go do other things. I that was in the back of my head for a long time. I said that I was going to do 20 groups for 5 years. I ended up doing it for 9 years. And, that's been done for a couple of months now on short notice. When I announced that, my cell phone blew up, my inbox blew up, and I had some incredible opportunities that came knocking. The 20 group took about 110 days out of my year. And, it was a lot of flights, a lot of hotel rooms. I think I spent last year 109 nights in hotel rooms. So that's what got freed up by giving that up. What I have decided to do is I had one large dealer group that I have decided to work with them for the next year. And they put me on the payroll and put me into their system.
Is it a consulting gig? Consulting?
I don't want to call it consulting because I feel like consulting is a 4-letter word with some extra letters in it. I never like being called a consultant. I'm an employee. I'm not not going to get a 1099. I'm going to get a W-2, and
Understand.
I'm going to get some benefits, and I got a company email address. And for a couple of reasons, I haven't come out publicly and said who that is. I'm sure a few people have probably already figured it out. But it's a year commitment, and one of the things that was involved in that was, hey, understand I'm a process guy, and what we're talking about doing, what we're talking about fixing is not going to be easy. It's going to be hard, and it's going to involve everybody. And are you bought in? And so I think we're in agreement, and that ball has already started rolling, and I think it's going to be really good when we're done. And
That's awesome.
hopefully a year turns into 2 years, and then I've got one other industry vendor who I'm talking to right now, and a lot of the stuff that I'm doing, if I needed to make money, if I wanted to make money, that would be one thing. What I'm in kind of my twilight years in the industry is how can I leave this industry better? And the company that I'm talking to right now, what I think we can do with them will make life better for 2,500 dealers in the country, and not only for the dealers, but for consumers. And so if I can do that, and in the end, I guess the money is nice, and I'm going to make considerably more spending less time than I was, and I'm going to impact more dealers. I mean, in my 20 group career, I'm working with 100 dealers over the course of the year. Now I'm talking about impacting more than half the industry.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm good with that. It's going to be good. I think the second one that I'm working on will probably be a lot more public. You'll probably see a lot more of me talking about that and talking about what we're doing. Not just because I'm trying to brag and say, hey, I left this one job and now I got this cool new job that's better. Because I'm going to need feedback from everybody in the industry about,
that's right.
Here, we've only got so much capacity. Here's the things that we can do. Here's the things I'm thinking about, and here's what's in my head. But what's in the bigger picture? Because there are some things, even like with the DMS, the dealer management system that we use, that would be really important to me. But when I talk to other dealers, they're like, you're off in fantasy land. There's other things we need to be working on. So I'm going to be talking about this stuff because I need feedback from everybody.
That's right. Let's get into the state of the power sports today. If you had to explain the current state of the power sports industry to a dealer, let's say that's been out of the loop for the last 10 years, what would be one of the first things you'd say?
Oh man, you kind of word that in a weird way. Somebody who's been out of the industry for 10 years. I mean, it's all different. It's the, unfortunately, I guess to say it, a lot of dealers today are still running their businesses like they were 10 years ago. And that's the wrong way to be doing it.
That's what I was hoping you would say, man.
Yeah, it's, you saw me talk about it the other day. I mean, the digital leads, the emails, the texting, the how we interact with consumers these days, it's all different. And I think if somebody did some kind of a time warp and they lost 10 years of their life, I mean, they came out of the coma and they could still walk and think. I don't know if that would be really, really tough. I mean, the industry has definitely changed a lot, and that's really what I've been working on in my advocacy, and what I'm doing is trying to get dealers to recognize that this industry is moving. Keep up or get off the ride.
That's right.
Right on. So another question with the state of power sports today. OEM dealer relationships are always evolving. What are dealers facing right now in terms of surcharges, tariffs, pricing, factory demands? Do you have any insight on those topics?
I think I would be careful with using the term evolving, because I think that's kind of
an assumption.
Yeah, I would put that in the terms of evolution. And to me, like, evolution is things get better, that they improve, that it's good for everybody. What I think we're really seeing right now if you read some of the stuff I put online, I mean, I often talk about, is a manufacturer, are they a vendor or a business partner? And there's a big difference between the two. And, you see a lot of the players in the industry right now, to me, are kind of going down that vendor path. And they are looking at, what did Chrysler and Chevy and Ford and all these other companies do? And how can we emulate that? And what, those auto manufacturers did was drove retail pricing down to the bare minimum. Those dealers historically, outside of the pandemic and kind of where we're at today, don't make any money on the vehicles that they sell. They make it all in the back end. And that's what the manufacturers would like. And I said for a couple of years coming out of the pandemic that we were going to see the market share battles commence once we got out of the pandemic, and that I had always felt that the industry was just going to carry on the same pathway it had since 2009. And all the data backs up. I mean, I've got a lot of things wrong. I don't go back and delete the posts that I made where
Right.
I made big mistakes. You can go back and see the things that I've got wrong, but go back and read what I said about the industry, and I freaking nailed it. I was 100% on point on all of those topics. And, I think that that relationship between the dealer and the manufacturer is incredibly important. And I think that we've got a lot of employees who work at these vendors that we deal with on a day-to-day basis that have never worked in the industry. They don't ride motorcycles. They don't understand the industry. They don't understand retail, and they need to get the hell out of those companies and put some smart people back in who do. And that's a big problem for this industry. And, right now we're in a position where a lot of these vendors are just trying to manhandle the dealers, and it's not good. And, you've got dealers out there who are concerned that the manufacturers are trying to get rid of the dealers. And the reality is, I had a statement that I always told the customer at the dealership, and my dealership, not perfect, made a lot of mistakes, screwed a lot of things up over the years. Probably looking back would have done a lot of things differently. But when I had a customer that came to me that said, my vehicle's been in service for 6 weeks and you guys are screwing it up and you haven't diagnosed it correctly, you haven't ordered the parts fast enough, whatever. I want the number to the manufacturer, and I want to talk to the manufacturer directly. And I would give them that number, and I would say, I'm just giving you a disclaimer. If you call this number when you're done with that phone call, as pissed off as you are right now, you're going to be exponentially more mad when you get done with that phone call, because the manufacturers do not know how to deal with customers, and they do a horrible job. A lot of them will drop the dealer in the grease and say, well, this is all the dealer's problems, when the manufacturer made something that we don't even have the tools to troubleshoot and fix, nor get the support. I mean, we've got manufacturers right now that when we've got a complex job in the service department and we need help help fixing that, we go to a website, we upload some digital files, we take a few pictures, and then we wait a week to get a response back. What do you think that does to the customer? So, the reality is,
and it's your
the reality is the manufacturers cannot get rid of us dealers because they need us. And
That's right.
it's not just that they can get rid of us dealers and they're going to make the extra 12 to 13 points that we add to the process. They're going to start having to add sales teams and programs and financing.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't think us dealers are going away. I think that it's a symbiotic relationship that we both need to work together. And, right now, with a lot of the manufacturers, that is not happening. And I'm sure you can tell I'm passionate about this. And it pisses me off. And,
of course,
that's my hope with this NPDA, the National Power Sports Dealer Association that I'm a part of, and that you came and visited last week, is that
awesome.
we need to get dealers to join that organization.
Absolutely.
And we need to get to a critical mass where when a manufacturer is acting badly, that we as a group can go, you know what? We're going to put you in timeout for a couple of months. We're not going to order vehicles. We're not going to advertise. We're not going to focus on your machines. And when you come back to the table and you want to work with us dealers, then by all means, we're happy to do that.
Yeah, strength in numbers, of course, man.
Now the reality is, and I want to be clear here, that I think there's a lot of cases where dealers need to do a better job as well. We dropped the ball. I've said many times, if you're going to be a dealer in a marketplace and you're going to represent a manufacturer, then you truly need to represent it. So you need to have product selection. You need to train your staff. You need to keep, parts and accessories in stock. You need to do your part as a dealer. And I think that there are a lot of dealers in the country who are kind of franchise squatting. They've got a brand, and Texas is a great example. I mean, we have strong franchise laws in Texas, but as a dealer, when you get a brand, once you've got it, I mean, you can just tell the manufacturer to go pound salt.
That's right.
And so, I don't like using that option. I don't think it's the best option, but I had a nice 90-minute talk with Jake Mirabel from CF Moto yesterday. He was nice enough to give me some time. He's a vice president at CF Moto, and was able to kind of talk about the industry. And one of the things we talked about is how does the manufacturer walk into a dealership and say, here's the legitimate opportunity in your market area. This is not the gerrymandered sales data that we see from some of our vendors, but this is the true market opportunity. And here's what you're doing. And if you as a dealer are fulfilling market demand and you're representing them well, then hey, we're good. We're not going to keep pushing inventory down your throat. We're not going to go at this. You've always got to be growing. But counter to that, if the dealer is not doing a good job representing the brand, then how does the manufacturer have that discussion with the dealer and say, hey, you need to spend a little bit more on advertising. You need to stock a few more units. And I know you're not comfortable with this, but it is selling well everywhere else in the country. And I know you're a motorcycle guy, but we need you to put some effort into ORV. How does that happen? We as dealers, if we're going to have a brand under our roof, we have a responsibility to do as good with that brand as we possibly can. So it's not one-sided. It's not just the vendors and overreach and them not understanding our business and not wanting to work with dealers. We need to do a better job as well. And if we work together, then the industry is sustainable. And 20 years from now, you get to talk to some other guy who's sitting in my seat and you're like, yeah, the industry's doing great and we're doing a good job. But that is not the path that we are on right now.
You've written about credit card fees. I like all those articles that you write and post, the surcharges and dealership profitability. What's one thing dealers consistently overlook that eats their margins?
The whole credit card processing thing is criminal. And, it's crazy to me that, the average dealer, if you do $100 transaction on a credit card, you're spending somewhere between $2.30 and $2.90 for the privilege of accepting that credit card. And consumers in a lot of cases don't understand how much of a cost that is to the dealer, and how much risk we take on board. I mean, you as a consumer can just go home and say, call Visa or MasterCard and say, hey, I never made that purchase. And I mean, the dealer could have like arm around you picture, you holding up your driver's license and a signed copy of that's notarized saying, hey, I just spent this $100 buying this helmet at the dealership. And the reality is that the dealer is probably going to get charged back and probably going to eat that $100.
Damn.
So it's not a good situation. And what's insane to me is that same transaction that cost a U.S. dealer $2.60 or $2.70, that same transaction in Europe cost about 30 cents. And no, They don't have all the rewards cards and they don't have the cash back, which is kind of stupid. Oh, I get money back that I already spent. So dumb. But, we just have a weak political system in this country that has been bought out by these big corporations at the expense of the American consumer. And if we were to adopt the European regulations, we would be a lot better as a country. But
what's the solution? What do you think is the solution for this?
well, I want to answer.
Give cash incentives.
No, I want to answer your original question first. And you said, what do dealers overlook? And what dealers overlook is that they don't understand that the cheapest way to process a credit card is customers got the card, they push it in the machine, and it's got the chip in there. That transaction at that level is the least cost that you will ever endure. If you do that, but you don't have the customer's address and zip code in your DMS, and that's not transmitted over the transaction, that transaction costs you a little bit more. So if it was $2.10 as a chip card, but you didn't have the address and the zip code, it might be $2.30 or $2.40. What makes it even worse is you don't have a chip reader or customers calling you over the phone. And so you type the number in there and you don't have the zip code. That same transaction might cost you $3. So dealers don't understand that the exact same credit card can cost you a lot more if you don't do all these things to minimize fraud. But, what is the fix? I don't know how we fix our broken political system in this country, but realistically, we've got to get corporate money out of, sponsoring Congress people and representatives. I mean, I truly believe that if you want to fix this problem, and here's a wacky solution, that I think every congressperson should dress like a NASCAR racer, and every corporation who gives them money, depending on how much money it is, should have to put a logo. Yeah. And so it could be like, Microsoft and Visa and American Express.
You know who's getting bought. Yeah.
That is
you know who bought them off. So I think that you do things like that. And that's the extreme example, but legitimately,
no, it's a true example.
But you want to fix these problems, we've got to educate the people who can vote for representatives and who can speak up and explain that, I understand that there's a small number of people over here who are making a bunch of money on this, because everything in this country is a zero-sum game. Doesn't matter what it is. Public companies, small number of people making a bunch of money at the expense of everybody else and the workers who, hey, we got to save $1 million. Let's go fire 1,000 people and we'll save $1 million. But do the Wall Street guys make more money on that? Yeah. So everything is a zero-sum game. But in the end, we got to get to a point where Congress is willing to make decisions that are good for the American people who elected them, and that they don't really care if corporate America gets pissed off, because in the end, to keep going down this road that we're on is not going to end well.
Yeah.
Right. Another thing about lobbying is that if you look at who it benefits, it does harm the free market, because lobbying is done by those bigger boys. It hurts smaller businesses when our government is advocating for those larger businesses and edges out those smaller businesses who are trying to compete.
Whoever puts the most money in their back pocket and that's usually the big boys. So that's why the big boys seem to always win.
It's not all cases.
It
should be stopped.
If anybody listening to this thinks that in America that it's still one person, one vote, you got to do some research, because it is literally it's not based on population. It's based on how much money that you're willing to give your local or your national elected representative.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's depressing. Hopefully the answer to this question isn't as depressing. looking ahead, where do you see the industry going in the next 5 years, and what should both small and large dealerships do to prepare
You know,
if you see change?
I'm negative about some things, but I would tell you that I'm still extremely long on the industry. I don't think we're going anywhere. I think that, you've kind of seen under the current administration that, we're talking less about EVs and electric motorcycles and things like that. And I was never truly sold on that. I mean, I think that there's a space for that. I mean, I've said publicly, I think Elon Musk is the most miserable person in America, and I don't think I'm wrong in that statement. And he's done some cool things, but he's just a miserable human being. Got to get that out. Sorry, not really relevant. Not really relevant to what you asked me, but
That's
it's
all right.
Give us some. Well, you got to explain why. Why do you think he's miserable? Give us some context.
I think that a lot of people equate money with happiness, and the statement that I made the other day to somebody else about this is I said that the people who say that money isn't everything have never been poor, and I have been poor. I have gone to the free food store with my mother to get food. I have lived at a point in time where my mother bought a half gallon of milk, and then she mixed up a half gallon of milk powder so that we had a gallon of milk, and it didn't taste great, but it worked. I've been poor, and being poor sucks. But the counter side is, and there's a lot of people who in this country that enough is never enough, and they just got to keep money. But I say I'm not rich, but I'm wealthy. I got enough money to make it to the finish line at this point in time. I got enough money me and my wife are going to leave a big portion of our estate to create a foundation to help blind people. And
Nice.
that's good for me. What is Musk going to do with $400 billion? He's not doing anything good with it. He bought an election. I guess you can't tell me that he's a happy guy. And I don't think anybody could ever make me believe that.
Yeah.
But that to kind of go back to what you originally asked, segue. I think the industry is good, but what dealers need to be doing, I mean, I think we need to be focusing on the fundamentals. And, I talked about this the other day that, the automotive industry is transactional and the power sports industry is relational. And we've got a lot of car guys who are sniffing around our industry and they're buying stores. I can tell you financially that it very rarely ever ends well. And it doesn't only end well financially, but it doesn't end well for the consumer, because our customers, I'm sure both of you probably own a car, you probably bought a car. When is the last time that you went down to your car store and hung out on a Saturday morning and
Yeah, right.
drank some
Yeah,
coffee
right.
and ate some
No
free
doubt.
donuts, and then, hey, let's go on a ride to the bar, or let's go on a ride to go to
That's right.
Burger. You tell me when the last time is anybody who bought a car did that at their car dealership. And yet that happens
Right.
every weekend in our industry, not in one store, not in one state, but in all 50 states,
Thousands.
probably maybe 49. I don't know what the hell happens in Hawaii. It's the only state I've never been to in the last 10 years. So maybe they're not even a state. I don't know. But, it happens across the country, and we need to capitalize on that. We need to do a better job of building that relationship with our customers. We need to do a better job of adding value to the transaction. And, the dealers who are worried about, these customers are coming in and they're showrooming me. They're looking at the helmets that I've got and trying them on, and then they're going on Amazon and they're buying them. You know why they're doing that? Because you didn't add any value to the transaction. So you didn't have somebody go over there and say, hey, I see you're looking at this helmet, but what kind of riding are you doing? How fast are you going? And here's what you really need. And try this one on. And yeah, you're going to put this helmet on and it's going to be a little bit tight when you first put it on, but it's going to break in, or it's not going to move around when you're at 80 miles an hour on the road. What dealers do that anymore? And so if you're worried about the internet taking over your business, then that's a failure on your part, because I can tell you at our dealership, our parts and accessory department is a big focus on our future and our success. I mean, we make a lot of mistakes. We buy a lot of stuff that doesn't sell, but we want to be the place that when the customer comes in, it's on the shelf. We've got somebody who's trained who can talk about it. And when you do that, it's a small number of customers who leave and then go home and buy that product on the internet.
That's right.
It's a large number of customers who say, you know what, I appreciate what you're doing. Yeah, I could buy it a little bit cheaper on the internet. Maybe they negotiate and get a 5 or 10% discount. Hopefully not. Hopefully the extra money is worth it. But that transaction is something that a lot of dealers are missing, and it's where we need to be going. And the dealers who are absentee owners or not focused on training or not focused on culture and are just filling empty spaces with somebody who can fog a mirror, probably going to go away. And maybe that's not a bad thing. We've got a lot less dealer rooftops in this country that we had, in 2009 when, in the height of the recession. I don't think we've ever recovered to that level. I still think in a lot of areas of this country, there are still too many dealers, and there definitely are some who need to go away, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. Mark, as we come to the end of this podcast, this question is important to me because I've got a chance to get to know you over the last few months, listen to you over in when we were in Columbus. Out of all the direction you could have taken, why have you devoted your life now to advocating for and helping and teaching others in the industry?
I just like the military found me, just like Mark Woods came in and asked me to run a dealership when I didn't have any inclination to do this. About, I think it was 8 years ago, Dave McMahon was the editor of Power Sports Business. And he sent me an email one day, and I still to this day don't know how he found me. And he just sent me an email and said, "Hey, want to make you an offer. So write 6 articles for PSB over the next year. You'll probably have to do them on short notice, and I'm not going to pay you anything to do them. Are you interested?" And I said, "Yeah, why not?" And so I don't have a college degree. I don't have some dead sheep or goat or whatever they print the degrees out hanging on my wall. I got a high school education from Lumberton High School, which is a city located next to Beaumont, that is famous for all the wrong reasons. As I've said many times, the best thing about Beaumont was seeing it in the rearview mirror. And so that was something that I had never even thought about. And I started writing articles, and obviously they resonated with people because I started getting emails from dealers who said, "Hey, back in my head, I remember you saying something about this, but I can't find it online. Can you tell me what you said?" And so after a couple of years of that, I went back and took a lot of my original articles, and I built a blog, and I created a little website, and I archived a lot of that content. And then I just started getting more questions from dealers. And so that kind of prompted me to get very active on LinkedIn. And I just have been producing more and more content. And, as I said early on in this, I don't have a filter. I say what I'm going to say. I deal with the consequences of what I've said, after the fact. And I don't think that's ever going to change. That's just going to be me until the day that I die. But, I think one of the things that came very, very evident to me over about maybe 4 or 5 years ago is that there was nobody in the industry who was speaking up about vendor overreach. And, you know, I just was kind of there at that right time. And so I started saying what was on my mind. And, I know that some of the manufacturers don't like it. And in fact, probably all of the manufacturers don't like it. I will say that what has been very interesting is that I've had a few of the manufacturers have reached out to me and said, we're not always comfortable with what you say or the way that you say it. Don't fully disagree, but would sure like that when you are addressing an issue that involves us, that is not just an issue with your dealership, but with the industry players against us, reach out and let's talk about it and let's see if we can fix it. And, I've got a few manufacturers now that I can reach out to presidents, vice presidents, and say, hey, this is going on. Here's what I perceive as your point of view. Here's how the dealers are thinking about it. Here's some middle ground that I think would work for everybody. Do you think this is something that we can do? And, in a lot of cases, able to fix things. And so, that's been the good side of my advocacy. For the vendors who just think that I'm going to go away, or that, they're just going to keep doing what they're doing, I'm not going away. And I'm going to keep speaking. I'm going to keep advocating that as an industry, we work together to make things better for everybody, not only for the OEs, but for the dealers and our customers, because we've all three got to come together to make sure that this industry is successful going into the future. And you know what? I'm 55. I got some free time with other people don't seem to have, and I'm going to keep at it. And I don't have an I don't have an endpoint. So, I said it yesterday in the article I put out on LinkedIn. I'm like, if anybody else wants to come and talk, by all means, come and talk. But I will clarify that if that's all that's going to happen is it's going to be talk and there's not going to be any action, then you're wasting your time, because there are a lot of things in this relationship between dealers and OEs that are broken right now. And if you're just going to be entrenched in your position and not willing to move towards the middle, then you're wasting time. You're wasting your time and my time, because we got to fix some things. And in the end, I feel like we're going to get to a point where the dealers understand what's going on and the dealers recognize that they have choices. And I sure hope that the dealers are going to focus on improving things for their business partners and keeping the vendors in timeout until they choose to act in a better fashion.
Good answer. All right, Mark. Well, we're at the end of the show. You've successfully made it. Where can people reach out to you? What do you have going on? Any social media channels? I know you've got LinkedIn. I'll put these in the show notes so you don't have to spell things out, but give us an idea of where it's a good place to keep up with you.
Yeah.
And if you got anything else going on.
No, it's, LinkedIn is really the only place that I'm super active. So that's kind of I do have a website. It's marksheffield.com, and, that's kind of where I blog. I'll be honest that kind of the blog gets a little bit behind, because for me, that's kind of the articles that need to be archived and, that people need to search and understand. The hard hitting stuff is always on LinkedIn. I really like the interaction there. I have a Facebook account, but I really personally despise Facebook. And I primarily, I only use that to rile people up. And
you actually just post jokes on there, which is kind of cool. So
yeah, Facebook's kind of a useless medium, and probably it's not a good use of anybody's time. So, but you know what, I can rile people up, and people on the left think I'm on the right, people on the right think I'm on the left, and the reality is there is no party who represents what I think we need as a country, and so I can play both sides of the
Sound
coin,
libertarian.
but I don't bring politics to LinkedIn. I mean, that truly is I think it needs to remain a professional place. And I really enjoy the conversation. I mean, LinkedIn has been so powerful. I've had, in the past, I had issues with my website. I couldn't figure it out. I didn't understand WordPress, and just put a post out there and say, "Hey, I got this problem. Can somebody help me?" And 10 minutes later, I'm doing a screen share with somebody who took a couple of minutes to fix it. And I'm like, God, that's really cool. And I know that there are dealers who have commented on my post that have actually got calls and emails from manufacturers saying, take it down. So we don't like it. But you know what?
Really? Wow.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
It's pretty crazy. I mean, and the First Amendment is only between, individuals and the government. It's not between you and your manufacturers, but it's insane to me that, some of the manufacturers are that afraid of what I've got to say that they're willing to try to silence people from publicly supporting me. But I've got,
Amazing.
as I told Jake yesterday, I've never burned a source. I got a lot of people at a lot of companies who reach out to me and send me messages and give me interesting tidbits of information. And what I can share, I do, and I'm going to continue doing that, trying to make our industry a better place, because I'm long on the industry, and I believe that we're successful well into the future. But it's got to be a strong relationship between the manufacturers and the dealers. It's one-sided right now, and I'm going to do all I can in the rest of my years in this industry to fix that.
That's right, man. It's a good thing. What you're doing is absolutely awesome. The industry needed a voice, and they needed somebody who understands both sides of the fence, which is the most important part. And you give it to both, which I love about you. You just don't smash the OEMs or the dealers. You smash them both, and you try to get them in the right spot. So keep up that amazing work, man. Just want to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule, man. I know you travel like a wild man. So thanks for giving us the time. Been awesome to get to know you, and keep up this fight, man. You're great for the industry, and we love what you're doing.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're doing as well. And, any voice for the industry, I think, is a good one. So keep at it, and hopefully we get to talk again in the future.
Absolutely, man.